Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a conversation with the Mutts. I'm your host for the evening, the Celtic Mutt. We are not going to be joined this evening by Mrs. Mutt. She is a little under the weather and did not feel it appropriate for her to try to be a part of this show. Hopefully, we wish her the best, and she'll be back next week, hopefully. Anyway, for tonight's show, we're going to be discussing unusual facts about the Wild West. Now, the Wild West is in and of itself a unique glimpse into our history. Um, did you know, for example, that the word cowboy is deduced from the Spanish word vaquero, which is part of the word for cow? Um, Also, for those of you who did not know, cowboy was at one time a derogatory slang term used for African Americans, of which one quarter of American cowboys were African American freed slaves. Texas had used some of its slaves while they were away at the Civil War to drive some of its cattle to market. In Texas, you were lucky if you got $4 a head, whereas if you made it all the way out to Chicago or Missouri, you were getting $40 a head. So it would stand to reason that cowboys would take upwards of 300 head to the railhead in Missouri or up into Chicago, and then ship it out from there. Again, 40 versus 400 kind of makes sense to me. Um, as I said, the word cowboy does derive from the word vaquero. Um, though there were many cowboys both before and after the golden age of American cowboys, it really started in 1866 after the Civil War. Um, Many Northerners were starving for beef, and there were an estimated 400 million head out west. So cowboys would sign up to take these to the railheads, and then they would from there be dispersed out throughout the country. Actually, at one point in I believe it was 1890 census. Hold on a minute, and I will tell you. Uh, yep, estimated 1/4 of cowboys were black, as I stated. There was a period where a percentage, and I'm looking for that percentage now, uh, of cowboys was listed in the 1890 census as cowboys. They listed themselves, that's what was their chosen profession, um, or ranch hands. Uh, what we know now as the Old West slash the Southwest was once a part of Spain, um, and in from 1860 from actually not from 1860 from the 1600s up until the uh, mid 1900s, or actually not even mid, early 1900s, late 1800s. uh, Spain sold off part of what was Texas and Oklahoma. Actually, Texas won its freedom from Mexico. Uh, so it was actually a part of Mexico up until it won its independence. Um, I'm still trying to find that statistic, but I don't seem to have it. As I said, the Civil War had just ended, and they were getting $40 in the North per head of cattle. So in 1866, men began driving herds of longhorn cattle, 4 million of them to be exact, towards the railroads and the hungry North. I guess the South just wasn't hungry. They kept saying the hungry North in what I was reading. So I guess the South just didn't want beef. I find that hard to believe, being damn near carnivore myself. The long cattle drives and the almost mythological era of American cowboys had begun. In fact, here we go, hundreds of men listed their occupation as cowboys on the 1880, not the 1890, I stand corrected, the 1880 U.S. Census. The term cowboy was first used in print by Jonathan Swift in 1725. However, and this goes back to it being a derogatory term. However, the term was originally used in a derogatory way to refer to African Americans. White ranch hands were known as cowhands. An estimated 1/4 of cowboys was black. American ranchers settled in Texas brought their slaves with them, later relying on them to mind their herds when they left to fight in the Civil War. The average age of a cowboy was 24. However, one was cited who was 10 years of age on a cattle drive, but the average age was 24. The most famous cowboy was William Butler, aka Wild Bill Hickok. He was known for his fast draw. He was not only a lawman, but also a gambler. He died tragically during a poker game, shot to death by Jack McCall. Wild Bill was holding a pair of black aces and eights, which has become known, even today, as the dead man's hand. So if you're holding a pair of black aces and eights, ladies and gentlemen, you are holding the dead man's hand. If driven... Oh, wait, I goofed that one up. The most famous cowboy, like I said, was Wild Bill. In the 1850s, Jefferson Davis started the American Army Camel Corps. The reason for that was because they were easier to handle across the desert plains of the Midwest. One of the deadliest gunfighters in the Old West was William Preston Longley, October 6th, 1851 to October 11th, 1878, also known as Wild Bill Longley. He was an American Old West outlaw and gunfighter, noted for his ruthless nature, speed with a gun, and quick temper, as well as an unpredictable demeanor. Horses weren't the only means of transportation, and this is where I was talking a moment ago about the camels. In 1855, Secretary of War Jefferson Davis, who later became the first and only president of the Southern Confederate States, allocated $30,000 for the Army to import camels from the Mediterranean and Middle East to use for transporting supplies, By 1857, the U.S. Camel Corps was looking after around 75 camels at its base camp in Camp Verde, Texas. By the way, Camp Green, Verde means green in Spanish, for those of you who didn't know. So technically the camp was known as Camp Green. While the camel proved effective at lugging materials across the desert, one group even made the 1,200-mile trek from Texas to Los Angeles, to the Los Angeles outpost, that is. The Civil War disrupted the experiment, and many of the animals were auctioned off, ending up working in circuses, mines, and rail construction, while others escaped and roamed free. So if you ever see a camel out west, just know that the likelihood of that wild camel probably stems from those 75 that were originally purchased. I personally don't think there are any left, but who knows? Excuse me. Geronimo, for those of you who are interested in Native American fact, Geronimo escaped his reservation a grand total of 3 times. After many years of fighting the U.S. Army, the Apache leader Geronimo and his band were captured in 1877 and taken into hold on a minute. In 1870, yeah, I'm a little tongue-tied tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Geronimo and his band were captured in 1877 and taken to a reservation in Arizona, but he struggled to adapt to settled life and ended up escaping 3 separate times. Once in 1877, once in 1881, and the final time in 1885. 5,000 soldiers, which equated to 1/4 of the U.S. Army, was involved in the last pursuit of Geronimo and his men, but it still took over a year to bring Geronimo into custody. He was the last Native American leader to formally surrender to the United States. While Bill Hickok was one of the first to win a quick draw contest. They actually classify it as a quick draw duel. One of the few recorded instances of a classic fast draw duel took place on July 21st, 1865 in Springfield, Missouri, between Wild Bill Hickok and the gambler Davis Tutt. A row over gambling debts brought rivals between the two former friends to a head, leading to a showdown in the town square. Standing sideways to each other at around 70 meters apart, the two fired more or less simultaneously. Tutt missed, but Hickok hit the mark, killing his rival. Hickok was later acquitted of manslaughter. An 1867 Harper's Ferry magazine article recounting the incident helped establish his legend. So I guess there is something good that can be said about Harper's Ferry, the magazine. The Pony Express. Now, I know many of you out there have probably heard of the Pony Express, and there is this huge legend of how the Pony Express will deliver mail. But a famous symbol of the Old West, the Pony Express Postal Service only operated for 18 months between April 1860 and October 1861. The service was devastated. Diversed to get national news faster to the West as tensions rose before the Civil War. A team of 80 or so riders carried the mail day and night between St. Joseph, Missouri and Sacramento, California. A 1,900-mile journey, by the way. Riders stopped every 10 miles or so at carefully placed station houses to swap horses and maintain a full gallop. Shrinking delivery times from 24 days to 10, however, caused the demise, which I would not have thought it would have been a problem. The arrival of the telegraph, which made communications almost instant, rendered the service obsolete. So there's just a few facts, ladies and gentlemen, about the Wild West. I hope that you have enjoyed this brief conversation with the Mutts, aka the Mutt. Next week, again, we hope that Mrs. Mutt will be joining us and that she'll be feeling up to joining us. She had a whole line of things that she wanted to discuss, but unfortunately, as I said, she was not feeling up to par. So I want to thank those of you who have joined us for this abbreviated version of a conversation with the Mutts. And as always, we want you to take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you again next week.